Chapter 4. Worrier or Worrier? To successfully embark on any journey will require you to do this one basic universal thing. As simple as it may seem, you'll actually need to venture on that very journey. Be fearless. To do so, you'll have to identify who you are at a given moment. The method I use when in doubt is to look at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. Once I've anchored myself and found the pace of my breath, I ask myself, if I was a fictional character in a movie, how am I approaching a particular scene? For instance, if by walking into an office before a meeting, you'll have to acknowledge that you've left a previous scene and are now entering a new one. Just like yourself, everyone else is also a hired actor, paid in social capital for the role. They have their own contexts and reasons for being present. Although remember, so do you. Therefore, you'll have to recognize these two choices. A, figure out what the regular topic of discussion within social interactions are. Or B, try to throw in a monkey wrench and say or do something out of the ordinary. Starting a new version of the interaction within a scene could be complicated. A tradition is a tradition for a reason. It's simply rooted and often collectively enforced to retain its structure. It's not the easiest thing to catch a frequency within a scene if you don't try to change it beforehand. So we're stuck having to answer the age-old question. Am I a worrier or a worrier right now? And which of the two will be most beneficial for everyone involved within the current scene? You can have an idea in your mind of who you are every time you enter a new scene, but evidentially, you'll only have one of two choices. So let me ask you the same question. In all of the scenes you've taken part in within this movie you call life, is your default mode on worrier or worrier? Take a moment and figure it out. And try this to help you along the way. List 5 general habits that you'd like to quit. Now look at the list once more and tweak the habits. Write them as open-ended questions. For instance, if you indulge in negative self-talk, then ask yourself, how can I change the narrative of my inner dialogue? How could I make a shift from self-criticism to self-compassionate and self-loving? Now ask yourself, which of my 5 habits am I willing to try to reduce at this moment? What's the one thing I could do to start my venture? Is it by spending 40 minutes a day to create 100 post-it notes that I later hang up at random places in my home? I know what you're thinking. There's no way you do 100 post-its in 40 minutes. That's the inner voice talking to you. But how about taking 40 minutes a day with a goal to create 100? If you manage to find 5 in a day, that's 5 more than you had yesterday, and tomorrow you'll aim to do 95 more. And if you don't succeed in 95, it wouldn't mean that the previous 5 have now mysteriously disappeared. Collect all of the messages from the post-its and don't hang up a single one until you've collected all 100. There's pride in completion. And who is best to complete something that will help you more than you? If you don't, you'll never know if you ever had it in you. You owe it to yourself to know. It makes no sense that others know you better than you know yourself. If you're having difficulties answering the questions about yourself, ask those around you. Yes, it'll feel weird and awkward, but only for a moment. And that's the point. Surround yourself with co-pilots that are willing to look at your blind spots when you're focused on keeping your eyes on the road. Don't worry. Even in Aesop's fables, the tortoise beats the hare. Slow progress will always beat a quick fix. The goal is to finish all of the races you've ever begun. I have a confession to make. I was never good at learning languages. Or at least, that was the narrative when I studied at the international school. You see, like for many Scandinavian countries, learning English was a must at an early age. But seeing that our curriculum was already flooded with English literature, we were blessed. Blessed enough to receive the grand prize of learning a third language a whole year earlier than my peers from other schools. I failed miserably every single semester. Yes, every. Meanwhile, my twin brother had just cracked the code to learning Mandarin Chinese. He saw my struggles as he had to sit there and listen to the teachers comparing our learning abilities year after year. Fast forward 3 Earth spins around the sun, I graduated from secondary school and was finally on my way to start at a new high school. I had finally worked up the courage to try this language learning venture once more. This time, I switched to another language and passed. Looking back at it today, I shouldn't have. But I guess the teacher saw my struggles and couldn't help but to do what he thought was helping. And in an ironic way, it did. The mixture of my brother adding yet another language to his arsenal gave me the boost to want to give it another try. This time, I approached the venture differently. I simply asked him, which language was statistically the fastest language to learn? His response was Turkish. He shared a very convincing story of how Turkish children managed to learn how to communicate quicker than Scandinavian kids. I was amazed. I promised myself that if I could only find the inevitable breaking point within the Turkish language, then I'd do fine. I started by finding a word, then a sentence, then a context to use the sentence in. Once I knew which sentence I would master, I now had to wait for an opportunity to use it. That was it. My only goal from now on was to identify when the perfect time to use the sentence was. Just like with great comedians, they wait for an opportunity to crack a well-written joke rather than creating a scene in order to use the joke. I'll repeat. If you care, you'll prepare. Transforming to a warrior from a worrier isn't easy, but possible. Fight the pain. I'm under the illusion that we're all warriors at heart. Pain will surpass with time, at least to some degree. In the famous words of the Eastern philosopher Lao Tzu, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But you see, some simply haven't walked in anyone else's shoes but their own, while some simply have been walking on the path of the worrier for way too long. But that's fine. We all worry. But we all don't worry about the same things for an equal amount of time. So what's the difference between the two? Some of us are able to separate the pain felt in the body from the action-reaction plan. The action/reaction plan is where your default, I'll do this and this much of this when I'm forced to deal with an overwhelming amount of pain. Many of us are using an outdated action or reaction plan that we adopted for a different situation, and often a long time ago. You can update your action-reaction plan. You can program yourself to adapt to a different behavior. You can train yourself to react in a certain way when certain things seem to be unfolding. For instance, in my earlier stage of Turkish learning, I was told to watch cartoons and read children's books. Without reason, it made it difficult for me to know what I was looking for. The voices were of children, and I couldn't identify myself with their expressions. Was I to start speaking like a child? Of course not. Months went by and the pain grew stronger. I couldn't find a good enough reason that would capture my attention long enough to finish a 20-minute video of Niloya. But suddenly, the thought hit me. If I was to watch cartoons, I would have to approach it by accepting that this was the lowest amount of grammar rules used that was understood by everyone. I had to be able to understand at least the basics of grammar that was being displayed. If a child can understand it, so can a grown-up. Instead of approaching it as watching cartoons in hope of being entertained, I found a key. Here's the key. I'd suggest you ask yourself the following question. If I was a polyglot, how would I approach optimizing my action plan? Why is this of importance, you might ask? The answer is that it's the only method that will save you time. Not to be confused with there only being one method. But all methods that a professional would use is a better method. Zoom out. The combination of methods used by polyglots will be the ones that non-polyglots will also benefit from using. For instance, creating a vocabulary list with all of the new words that you learn. Yes, it will take you time to get everything in order, but once you have it set, it will be easier to identify when a new word is learnt and how long it's been since you last feasted upon a new word. Optimizing your approach towards finding an inevitable breaking point will ultimately save you time. Time of peace, time of tranquility, and definitely time of choice. Space matters. Certain reactionary principles in familiar situations will provide energy saved from having to reinvent the wheel every time. When in doubt, remember that a professional will always save time somewhere in the process solemnly by being able to identify when to do how much of what. The Worrier would have approached the situation relying on mere chance and grit, while the Warrior would have practiced a simulation prior to that moment. The Warrior is often found relaxed in times of stress and despair, as she is aware of her context. She is merely on her toes, anticipating to execute her action-reaction plan as she waits for opportunity to unfold. She accepts that her situation may require efforts that seem uncomfortable at this particular moment. Subsequently, the Worrier can't find peace in any corner in which she turns, for they all feel like dead ends. Don't be misconstrued. The path of the Worrier is seldomly fun nor comfortable. These are other fancy words like motivation that we miscalculate to be of necessity. Although there might be a certain degree of discomfort felt, the end result tends to guarantee both peace of mind as well as body and soul. Any practitioner of the Eastern martial arts, known as the Budo sports, often have their ranks and knowledge depicted by the hue of the belts that they wear, outlined like a tabula rasa, starting with a white piece of cloth and slowly evolving into a black one. If you've ever ventured on any path of improvement, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of the blue belt syndrome. The blue belt is literally the rank halfway towards a black belt. The syndrome works like a plateau within the journey of consciousness. For instance, we've all at some point tried to learn something and somehow just couldn't get past a certain stage, hindering us to surpass onto the next. It's frustrating. It's annoying. And it can even develop into self-deprecation. The situation will always require that you act accordingly. In order for X, you must Y. I'm not talking about convincing yourself that if you just try harder, quicker, better, that it would bring a desired result. I'm talking about being in control of adjusting the trajectory. If you're physically working out day in and day out, but relentlessly find the time to consume wheat, your physiology will act in accordance to that situation. The key is to identify what you keep doing right before the wheat starts slowing down your fitness results. A winning mentality is thinking about everyday concepts that eventually lead to winning. Anything you thought was supposed to be winning but isn't, simply isn't a winning concept. The key is to figure out which components/principles are essential for change. your inevitable breaking point. This is where the blue belt practitioner often finds herself stuck. She doesn't self-assess situations accordingly. She's aggressive when her formula requires calmness, and she is calm when aggressiveness is a necessity. The warrior makes sure to pay extra attention in identifying a potential plateau before it occurs. And when it does, addresses it accordingly. In the language of the Buddha, it means that you have to approach self-assessment with particular caution before the damage of not self-assessing has its way with you. The more you honor the codes of honor, the faster you'll find the particular situation's repeated, inevitable breaking point. That's the magic number. How fast can you identify an inevitable breaking point? How conscious are you of your inner warrior/worrier? And when it's all said and done, which one will you be serving with an action plan?
So what happened when I was struggling? How was my attitude?
Ulikuwa huchukii lakini
Was I crushed? No.
No, you weren't crushed. Lakini ilikuwa
Draining.
Yeah, draining. Kama unapata kuona mtu apanda kilima. Very strenuous. Unaona. Lakini alhamdulillah.
Slowly.
But sure.
But surely. Always?
Always. Slowly but sure. And kwa sababu siku zote ulikuwa una focus.